welcome back to Trudy Talks, or welcome if this is your first time finding my channel. I'm so glad that you're here. As is the norm, I'm going to try and hit this in one take, because who could be bothered with the cutting and pasting? Is that even what you do, cut and paste? I don't know. Who can be bothered with all the cutting together and putting it all together? I cannot be bothered. So we're going to do this in one take. We're going to just chat. We're going to try not to rub our elbows, which I think I did last week. I apologize for that. I'm just learning. I'm just making videos for the first time and I am learning. So yeah, I'm going to try and keep the elbows off the table so that you don't have that scratchy noise or any other kind of movement. I do move my hands a lot, so there's going to be a little bit of noise, but that's okay. That is okay. How are you guys doing? It is 28 degrees today as I'm filming this, so it's nice to be back in the house. It's nice for a little while to be outside, but then it definitely is it's good to get back into the air conditioning and enjoy a bit of that cool air, because it's hot. It's definitely hot out there. We arrived here in America 2 years ago in September, which is crazy. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the last episode, but yeah, 2 years. It feels like I blinked and we've been here for 2 years. We love being here so much. I know I definitely mentioned that in the last one, and I will mention it a lot because we love it so much. But there are so many different things that you have to do when you move to a different country. You got to figure out how things work, things like doctors, dentists. And when we moved to the States, we actually moved to a place called Bloomington Normal. So it was like a twin city kind of place. And Normal is the area that we lived in. So we lived in the normal side. It's nice to be normal for a little bit. And it was nice. It's kind of new. They've got a lot of new going on in Normal. Bloomington's sort of a little bit of the older side of town. Normal is also the home of ISU, so it's a university town, so it's a little bit like Belfast, not quite as big probably as Belfast is, but it was a cool place to stay for a little while. And then we bought our home in a different city in Illinois, actually the original home of the Chicago Bears. So if you know where that is, put it down in the comments. I'll be so impressed if you can figure out where that is. So that's where we live right now. The reason we live here is because we found this incredible house, most importantly, and also because it's on a body of water, not the house, although we can see the lake from our porch across the road. But the city that we live in has a body of water, and it is really cool to see the boats going up and down, and it definitely helps with that desire to still see some kind of water when you've grown up in somewhere like Donegal, and been near the water for all of your life. So yeah, we have been now in this city for 4 months, and really I've been kind of figuring out dentists and doctors and things like that. So there's a lot of appointments this week. It's kind of been like, right, let's just get it done. Let's just go and get these things done. But I thought I would share with you my first dental story from America. So last August, I had been eating a bit of dairy milk chocolate. Now, if you have been to the States before, you'll understand that yes, they have dairy milk chocolate here, but they don't have proper dairy milk chocolate here, unfortunately, for them and for me. And so I keep a stash of it, that like if people have visited or if we've nipped home for a while, we'll keep a stash of it. So we had some in the fridge, which I don't normally do chocolate in the fridge. I don't really get it, but we were looking to make sure that this chocolate stays, so it was in the fridge. So I took out a little bit of dairy milk chocolate and bit into it and broke my tooth. So broke the bottom part of my tooth. Clean off, sharp, and I had to book a dental appointment. So I had to work all that out and how you do it and all those kind of things. Again, part of your insurance, things like that with Gary's job. So had to work all that out. So made an appointment, did sort of a Google search, who's good, who should we go to, made an appointment, went to the dentist. Everybody seemed like they were really nice. Went in, basically looked at it, and it was filled anyway. And she's like, I think it's going to have to come out. And I'm like, oh, excellent. Brilliant. So let's get this tooth out. So she began to take the tooth out. So she had this really lovely dental assistant who was assisting her, as is her job. And this assistant was standing here beside me. I was on the chair, and it was starting to take a bit of to-ing and fro-ing to get this tooth out. So out of the corner of my eye, I could see that this assistant, let's call her Georgina. Let's go with Georgina. I'm not going to give you a real name. So I could see Georgina starting to sway a little bit. She sort of was coming towards me a wee bit, and then going back again and swaying. I'm thinking, hope Georgina's all right over here. You all right, love? So I'm lying there. She is pulling and tugging and breaking things, and just awful things. Nobody likes to go to the dentist, especially not for that. I've only ever had one tooth out in my life. This was the second, and nobody wants it, but you just get on with it. So Georgina is starting to sway, and sort of I can hear the dentist saying, are you okay? To her, oh, yes. And then all of a sudden, Georgina was not okay. Georgina was about to fall straight on top of me. So I sort of go like this to catch Georgina. I can't even talk. So I'm going, sit down, Georgina, sit down. I'm telling the dental assistant, who has just passed out on top of me, to sit down on the seat. Get her a seat. She needs to sit down. So the dentist is now shouting at her. She is absolutely raging that Georgina has nearly completely passed out on top of me. Georgina's going, I'm okay. Georgina's not okay. So she told Georgina to leave the room, and she carried on and just said, some people aren't built for this job. And I'm like, all right, that's great. So my first experience at a dentist here was of the dental assistant passing out on top of me as there was blood everywhere, and I was getting pulled at from all angles, and I mean all angles. So that was my first experience of a dentist in America. I did have to go back a few times after, and Georgina was fine. The next time I went back was only a couple of days later, and I'm like, you feeling all right, Georgina? yeah, feeling okay. So Georgina's fine, in case anybody wants to know. I was traumatized. No, I wasn't. I don't use that word lightly. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, it was interesting, and I think we have laughed quite a lot about Georgina over the last nearly year, I suppose. So that is my brilliant, funny story of my first dental appointment. I again was at the dentist today, and it was much better. Definitely a little bit more confidence building today. So yeah, so that's my dental story. So last week I touched on quite a few things. A few parts of my story is probably the best way to put it. And I've had quite a few people get in touch with me, and unfortunately they understand all too well that experience or or an experience quite like it, which is always really sad to hear. There's so much silence around the topic of trauma and abuse. There's so much silence, especially in the evangelical or church environment where these things are concerned. And I think that's because people like to put a label on it of church hurt. And the way of doing that means that you kind of play down, you play down the trauma and the pain of the victim, because you just are, it's just church hurt. You just have to get over it and move on. And like I said last week, it would be really, really good if that's what was possible, but it's not just church hurt. It's trauma. It is deep pain, and it's soul changing. It changes your soul, it changes your psyche, and it removes a lot. So it removes your ability to tell your story, because there's so much surrounding it. It makes you be silent, and that's like trauma on top of trauma, because you can't tell your story. You can't find other people that are like you, because you're scared to tell your story. And one of the brilliant things that I'm definitely seeing now is the fact that especially probably the last sort of intensely, probably the last 5 years, you're seeing more and more people who are coming out and telling their stories of clergy abuse, spiritual abuse. And I think for me, all of the words used to describe those things have always been a way to downplay the actual outcome of them. And nowadays we're starting to see that people are actually calling them what they are, and that for people like me who went through it for such a long time and couldn't understand why it was so intense with me, why my body was really reacting the way it was, why my body was keeping the score, why my physical and spiritual and mental situation had changed so much. Things like that don't happen because of a church hurt. Actually, how do we hurt in church? They don't happen for things like that. It happens for major reasons. It happens for major life-changing reasons. And so it's really freeing to not be silent. And I would say to anybody that is listening to this who maybe has had to be silent, or if you're somebody who has silenced victims, you need to take a look at how you do things, because a lot of emphasis is put on the rehabilitation of the person who has caused the abuse. But the victim is the one that gets pushed to the side and gets left and gets thrown out in a lot of cases. And excuse me, they're the ones that have to leave everything they've known, while the accused, or the people that have caused the destruction, are able to get away with it and get rehabilitated. In some cases, no rehabilitation whatsoever, and in a lot of cases, not even any repentance. And that's a Christianese word that I try not to use, but if we're going to talk about those things, then you have to talk about repentance, and you have to kind of look at it and go, okay. And just, there's a much easier way to say it, is were they sorry? Were they genuinely sorry? If you have kids and they do something wrong, or they hurt someone, what you do is you teach them how to rectify the situation, and not just so that they pay lip service to it, but that they rectify the situation in the right way so that your kids grow up to be well-rounded, kind humans. But whenever you see and hear and experience stories of people who have done terrible, not childlike things, but terrible, abusive, unkind, cruel things to people, abusive things to people, some of them illegal, when stuff like that's done, and not only does the church cover it up and look after the accused, but they don't even look for a repentance there. They and it sounds like I'm saying that happens a lot, and it's because it does. I am sure there are one or two that actually do deal with the situation, although I think we would hear more about it if they did, to be honest. We hear a lot of covering up. We hear a lot of NDAs. Oh wow, NDAs in churches. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear that a church has asked victims to sign something that stops them from telling people that this is what happens in a institution or a church that is supposed to be transparent, that is supposed to not hide abuse but love and care and create safe spaces for people. So yeah, we don't want to hear about that, but that happens a lot, and it happens all over the world, not just in America, because I think sometimes people think, oh, those things happen over in America, but NDAs in Northern Ireland, no, they don't even know what that is. They know what that is. They know what that is. Mark my words, they know what that is, and it's disgusting. And the fact that anybody could ask somebody from a Christ-like background to sign something, to not be able to give testimony. And they love testimonies. They love people to give their testimony and tell what God has done in their life and what God has brought them through. But whenever the situation has been caused by them, they don't want to hear that story. They don't want to hear that whenever you were hurt beyond anything that's ever happened in your life, that they covered it up, and that they asked you to sign an NDA. They don't want to know. They don't want to hear those stories. So that testimony is not allowed. You're not allowed to give testimony of that. However, if you are the one who's done the abusing, you're likely to get a promotion or just a new church out of the road. Let's send him to there, and all will be well. And all will never be well. And trust me, I don't care about the abuser. I don't have to care. And I spent too much of my life having empathy for all of the people. But what I will say to you is that even though I don't care, and I think that whatever happens in their life, they deserve it because they've just covered up too much and they carry on. But what I will say is that it's really unfair on them. It's really unkind to not help them be better. It's really unkind to, as Christians, whatever you guys want to call yourselves, it's not kind to cover it up. It's not kind to make these people think that it was okay what they did. Because when you do that, you're not helping them. You're not helping their soul. You're not helping them to understand what it is to be repentant. I keep kicking this. I'm sorry. I keep kicking the stand. So we are moving about a bit. I told you, one hit wonder. I am not changing it. We're doing this in one hit. Whether I keep kicking it or not. So, on that, if you are someone that silences victims, please stop doing it. Because the damage is so intense. The damage is so life-changing that these people are walking away from God. And yet you're still allowing the abuser to be in a position where they can do it again, and you don't seem to care. So I'm going to say to you now again, stop it. Stop allowing this behavior to carry on, because you and I both know that it is everywhere. It is everywhere, and it can't be, let's look out for this poor wee abuser. It has to be, where is the victim in this? What has happened here? Why are we not doing what Jesus did, which was looking after the broken? Why are we not looking after those people? On this as well, I wanted to talk about just something that is a big part of what happens when you have to leave a church. What happens most times, and I can talk about my own situation. When everything had gone on for so long, every time I had to go into church, every Sunday, I was triggered so badly that my body was a mess. I didn't want to be there because I was so afraid, and that's literally what it was. I was afraid to be in the building because I didn't know where the next attack or the next cruel comment would come from, because that's what happens. You have a breakdown and nothing's safe anymore, especially not the place that caused it. So for me, there was this sense of, for 18 months I had to keep going to the place that had caused the abuse, and I had to keep going to it. And the reason I kept going to it, and the reason why a lot of victims keep going, is because in our mind we're told that we have to, in these Christian environments, in these church environments, in the religious environments altogether, you're told that you have to forgive, that you have to get over this situation, whether there was apology or repentance or not, you know. And the big statements are, you know, forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. And that's a whole other thing that we can talk about. And like I said last time, it's not about unforgiveness. It's about the mess that you're left in because of it. But whenever you have to be there and you have to go, it's trauma upon trauma upon trauma. And when you do that for 18 months and keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, it adds to that trauma that took me to the point where I was really 5 years ago, as I started to really heal and see stuff and have to deal with every single thing that I hadn't even realized was abuse. So when it came to that point where I couldn't do it anymore, I couldn't be in that building anymore, I couldn't be in that place, you have to make one of the most difficult decisions of your life. And it's always the most difficult decision of your life. It's not an easy decision to walk away from somewhere that you've been for 20 years. It never is. It's not an easy decision to know that you're going to walk away and that you're going to leave everybody that you've known and who you've done life with for 20 years. A big sign of a cult is that when you leave somewhere that you're pretty much shunned. Most people they won't even wave at you if they see you on the street. And I'll tell you that was what our life was like after we made the decision to leave. And you grieve intensely. You don't leave and cheer and, yeah, I don't have to be there anymore, this is wonderful, I don't have to go there. It's not that. You leave and you leave all that you loved. You leave and you leave all of the good memories, and I'm sure there were a few. I can't really remember very many of them, to be honest. Maybe one day I'll try to, but you grieve something awful. Like, it's not a simple thing, and victims grieve. They grieve for what they've lost. They grieve for their memories. They grieve for friendships and generational friendships. Even people who were so much older that they looked up to, that they had a chat with every week. Or it's not an easy thing to leave anywhere. And I know there'll be many of you that are listening to me that understand that feeling, that it's just not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to take your kids away from somewhere that they have known and went to Sunday school and grown up, and it's not easy. But it's another part of the trauma. When things aren't dealt with the way they're supposed to be dealt with, there is no other way. There's no way to reconcile when there's no repentance. There's no way to reconcile when the right action isn't taken. There's definitely no way to reconcile if an abuser is left in a position of authority, or are able to carry on doing what they've always done. If there's none of that, the victim again has to make a decision that is life-changing for them, for their family, and for us as a couple. We had to make a decision that was life-changing for us, and it was not the way that we had wanted it to go. It was not what we had hoped for when we came back from living in France for a year. After the most difficult year of our life, we had just wanted to come home, and that wasn't possible. Elbows. Sorry, I nearly thought of my elbows there. So I want you to remember that victims have massive decisions to make, even just past the abuse, and things are topsy-turvy nowadays, and there has to be a time when people realize that they're choosing the wrong thing. They're choosing the wrong helping. That's not even the right way to put it. But you've got to stop throwing the victims out. You've got to stop leaving them because they tell the truth. You've got to stop blaming the victims because they are pointing out that this stuff is detrimental to the church, but more so, excuse me, you've got to stop pointing to the victims and blaming them for telling the truth about the bad behavior, because they're not the ones that did the wrong thing. They're just the people that took it. They took the abuse. They had to deal with the abuse. You can't keep doing that. You can't keep victimizing the victims because you don't want anybody else to hear about what happens, because what happens in that scenario is that it keeps building and it keeps building and it keeps building, and it isn't going to stay quiet. People don't stay quiet forever, and even though following Jesus is not a part of my life now, what I will say is that deep down, I think there's definitely a side of me that believes that all things that have been uncovered or have been covered will be uncovered. That it'll not just go away. That we're starting to see so many people coming forward and talking about what has happened to them and how they've been victims of abuse, and in so many different religious institutions. This is not just the one that I used to be part of. We're talking across the board. People are coming out and saying, this is how I was treated, this is what happened to me. And there has to be compassion for those people. There can't be anger for those people, because you can't call yourself a Jesus follower and have anger against the people who have been absolutely destroyed and who don't even want to have anything to do with Jesus anymore. The only anger you should have in that moment is that that's what happened to them, and that it was on your watch if you're someone at the top, and that you didn't do the right thing. I think that's the best way to put it. I really love to hear stories of when churches have done the right thing, and they think they're doing the right thing by covering it up and not letting anybody hear about it. But actually you're really, really not, because it's called lying. You covering something up to keep it away from other people from hearing that they're in a place that's dangerous, or that it could happen to them or their children. You're lying. You're not just covering it up, you're telling lies. And as far as I can remember about my Bible, I'm not sure God's really big on lying. So yeah, silence is a killer. I've wanted to say that for such a long time. Silence is a killer. We have got to stop talking about victims and trauma like they're the ones that did something wrong. We have got to stop putting the blame on the victims, and instead we have got to talk about how we look after those people. Listen, I don't want you to look after me. I'm not interested. So I'm not looking for a way back in any way, shape or form. But I can't listen to it anymore. I can't have people contacting me who have been abused and thrown out onto the street because they told the truth, and that they challenged the behavior, and they challenged the abuse. The advocate in me cannot cope anymore with hearing that. So we have talked a lot today. I've got serious. I have told you some of my funny stories. I have quite a few funny stories, and we'll talk about those as the weeks go on. But I'll just say at the end of episode 2, I am so grateful. If you have stayed to the end, I wish I could give you a medal. I don't have any. Thank you. Thank you for staying to the end. Thank you for listening to Trudy Talks. If you are interested and if you like what you heard, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you don't miss any of our episodes. And yeah, I will see you guys again next week and we can chat. Have a good night. Bye.